Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
Just another week for the New York Jets. Achilles injuries, dramatic victories, and all the drama that goes with it. Thanks for joining the Can't Wait podcast. Tim McMaster here, along with our Jets reporter at the Athletic, Zach Rosenblatt. Good show. Our only show this week. We'll say that we are merging together the recap and preview episode this week. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching us on the live stream or if you're listening to us after the fact, give us the great reviews, the 5 stars, the thumbs up, all the stuff you can do. We appreciate it. Zach, I know you kind of took it on the chin on Twitter yesterday when we announced that we weren't doing a show after I'd scheduled it, because everybody, the thing about Twitter X these days, I think this started last year, when you go to somebody's page, if they have their birthday loaded in there, it lights up with balloons, which is how I learned that it was your birthday, was because I always check in on your Twitter to see what's going on. And I got all the balloons. And I think so people immediately know it's your birthday. And I think you got blamed for us not doing an episode yesterday. So I just want to say, for the record, that I think I was more responsible. We have an on-site for the company this week, so limited windows. You see, I'm not at home for a change. I'm actually in
a full studio,
the New York Times building.
Yeah. I should. I mean,
you were printed in the New York Times a couple weeks ago too.
I think I might have been yesterday actually too. I didn't get the actual paper, but yeah, they're taking they're interested in the Jets recaps for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, yesterday, I wouldn't say you get 100% of the blame because you did have a window, but I had a birthday dinner planned, so that was partially the reason why, but obviously not the full one. Got some dinner in the city at this Italian spot called Teresi. It was overpriced. It was good, but very expensive. So that's
you didn't pay, right?
No, Samantha paid. She treated me.
I was going to say that's the next step, Zach. We've talked about you guys are living together now, but on your birthday, does she pay for it? That's good to know.
She did. She treated me, she pampered me up. She did a great job. Props to her. She gave me a gift card to Patagonia, which everybody on here knows.
How many hats are you going to buy with that gift card?
That's a good question. I was good in Colorado. I went to a Patagonia store because if I pass by one, then I kind of have to go to it. And I didn't buy anything. So, some progress has made in my life. I'm the kind of person that if I go somewhere and I don't buy something, it almost feels like I'm saving money because my tendency is to buy stuff. So I feel like I did good.
Just take that money and just kind of put it aside every time.
You're right. Yeah.
Didn't buy a hat, $30 in a mattress.
There you go. It's a good idea.
It's crazy now that how much hats cost too. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's nuts.
All right. Should we get into this Jets team? We're gonna recap the Broncos game a little. I mean, we're not gonna dive into it now that it's Wednesday. I think people have heard enough about that game, but we'll talk big item stuff from that show, from that game, and we'll look ahead to the Eagles as well. But let's start with AVT. Obviously devastating news for him and this team as well. I know people have said out there on social media, the Jets have to give an Achilles for a victory every time they win a game this year, which is, it's depressing. But AVT done for the year, for the second straight year. And suddenly you look at this line and you think of Becton and all the injuries, and now AVT, and Becton seems like the less fragile player, which is crazy to me. How does this team kind of cope with this from the start? Let's just go there. Obviously he was instrumental. He's a guy you can move around, but he had settled in there on the right tackle with the other injuries they've had. So now what to keep this offensive line afloat?
Well, my first recommendation would be to stop going to Denver, because it seems like that's where the bad things happen.
And they have grass.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. You feel for AVT because, beyond the football side of things, the human side, he's one of the nicer guys in that locker room. He's done so much for this team and sacrificed in a lot of ways, moving around as an offensive lineman, which is very hard, especially last year, but this year too, where they, just last week, Saleh was talking about moving him to right tackle permanently because he was so good there. And yeah, so, he's going to be eligible for a new contract this offseason. They'll probably pick up his 5th-year option, I imagine, unless they feel like he's not going to be the same player. but he was on a path to making a lot of money because they kept talking over and over again about how important he was and all the ways he saved them. And yeah, it's on many levels. It's just, it sucks because the offensive line was finally starting to play pretty well because you had the same group together for multiple weeks, which they hadn't since last year. Even last year, I don't think they really had that at all. And they were playing relatively well, especially in the running game. And yeah, so, it's a really tough loss, but, now they got to move forward. But yeah, you really feel for the kid. And, he's a guy that was universally liked by the fan base, I think. He pretty rare, like, even if he wasn't dominant necessarily most weeks, like you rarely saw him making, back-breaking errors. That was usually coming elsewhere. And on the opposite side, like Mekhi was battling knee stuff during that game. He wound up toughing it out, and it seems like he's practicing today. So seems like he's okay. But they had bad luck at the position last year. They're not off to a great start in terms of luck right now. You've lost Dwayne Brown, and whatever fans think of Dwayne Brown, he's a starting caliber offensive tackle. And you lose AVT now, and so you're another injury away from being in pretty big trouble, especially at tackle, but elsewhere as well. So it's a huge loss. It's not like, last year they also lost Breece Hall, and that was a bigger loss than I think AVT was last year. You can survive this. You just ultimately feel really bad, especially, in the moment, whenever a guy gets declared out really right away, it's bad. And it was a calf injury, which usually when they call it a calf injury in a game, it winds up being an Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Saleh sounded optimistic after the game. I know people are going to laugh at me saying those words in a sentence together, like the history of what happens after he says that. But they felt like, I think because he played a play on it before realizing that something was wrong. I think Saleh said, and then and it was weirdly, it was like same thing as last year. Like all of a sudden AVT was out of the game and nobody like noticed it happening. And then I think all of a sudden he was like in the locker room. The same thing happened last year. I think everybody was focused on Breece and nobody realized that AVT was out, and then he was out for the year. Achilles is a harder one to come back from than a triceps injury, which he had last year. And so that would be the biggest concern. But yeah, I don't know. It's
especially for off, big bodies, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot different than even Aaron Rodgers coming back from it for sure. So yeah, hopefully he comes out the other side and is okay and is able to keep going on the trajectory he was. But now this is 2 straight years where, 5-6 weeks into the season, he's knocked out for the year. And it's tough to recover from that. Mekhi has managed to recover from it to a degree with knee injuries, which are not easy to come back from either. So it's not like it's hopeless, but yeah, it's just really, you just really feel for him and for the team because they've for all the flack and a lot of it deserved they've gotten for not building the offensive line. He was one that it seemed like worked. Even if you could argue trading up for a guard, which some people did, was not like the best allocation of resources. I think he was making it so that was like still a solid trade because AVT was very good and could play multiple positions. And now he's out of the fold and you have to rely on maybe Max Mitchell, it seems like, is probably the initial favorite to be right tackle. I think he played okay filling in, had a bad training camp. I trust him more than Billy Turner. And then the question comes, like, what happens when Dwayne Brown comes back, which, we can get into that now or later. But those are options, and you have Mekhi at left tackle. He's kind of settled in there a little bit. But none of them are as good as AVT was at right tackle. And so, yeah, they're in a tough spot, and it's unfortunate, but you have to keep moving forward. So,
Dennis Kelly added to the practice squad for depth. What is the timetable for Dwayne Brown at this point? Do we know?
Well, I think he's eligible to come off after the bye, but we don't know like if he's ready to go back yet or not. I've seen him in the locker room, which last year when he got hurt, when he was hurt in the beginning of the year, I didn't really see him in the locker room. I don't know if that means anything, but it's at least indicative that he plans on coming back because, he's at an age where if he wanted to retire, he could, obviously. So I don't know exactly. I would think he should be okay to come back after the IR stints up, but I don't know for sure. And then the factor with him is he's never played right tackle in the NFL. Mekhi had played some in college at the very least, which is more recent than Dwayne Brown's last time he probably played it, which was probably in college. And he's been in the league for like 15 years now. So, yeah, I don't know. I know fans don't want to see Dwayne Brown out there anymore, but you have to put your best 5 out there. And if he's one of the best 5, then you figure it out. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if you want to keep moving Mekhi back and forth. That can't be good for his knees. Do you put Dwayne Brown at right tackle and hope he's better than Max
He's
Mitchell?
never played right tackle, right?
Yeah.
Dwayne Brown.
Yeah. I don't know if he played it in college. I would have to dig into that. But yeah, he has not played it in the NFL, and he's been in the league a long time and had a lot of tendencies on the left side.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's going to be something to consider in a few weeks. Maybe Max Mitchell makes it so it's not even something they have to consider, and that would be the best case scenario. But we'll see.
All right, let's talk a little more positive. All right, let's go back to the Broncos game a little bit. And Breece Hall, obviously 177 yards. The scene of the crime, so to speak, where he was injured a year ago. I know he talked about it after the game and like pointed to the table where he had found out that his season was over a year ago, and he kind of got to exercise those demons a little bit. The thing that stood out to me was like when he was on the pitch count, the infamous pitch count. He had the break free moment early in the season when he got caught, and on Sunday he did not get caught. He's clearly like back. I would say like if he was 90% there and he just didn't quite have that final burst of speed, he had it all on Sunday.
Yeah, he even said after that first one that it was literally fatigue, like he was still working his way back into football shape. Even so, I don't even know
the lactose acid
it wasn't even
builds up.
Yeah, it wasn't even necessarily. Acid. It might not even been necessarily that he wasn't fully back. It was just that he wasn't fully back stamina wise.
Mm-hmm.
He was certainly back when they, however you want to phrase it, they unleashed him the other day in a way that we've been calling for the entire season. Even the week where he had 12 carries for 18 yards against the Cowboys, like at least they were giving him the ball, even if it was like Breece Hall can break one at any moment. So you keep giving him the ball until he hopefully does. And the run blocking was on point, especially on that long touchdown run he had, which kind of blew the game open and pretty much won it for them, arguably, because the offense wasn't really doing anything. Broncos were clearly not very good and just wanted the Jets to be in the game, and the Jets weren't taking that opportunity for the entire first half, pretty much. And yeah, they fed Breece, and we're back to, we've talked about this, we're back to the formula from last year. If they're going to win games, it's going to be Breece dominating and the defense doing their job, and they're going to win low-scoring games against good teams, and you hope against bad teams like the Broncos, you probably should be scoring more than what they did, but you hope against bad teams is when you maybe open up the offense a little more and get Zach some confidence. Again, didn't really do that against the Broncos, so there's some stuff to criticize them for. But 0 for 5 in the red zone. I think there were 3 of 14 on third down, like all stuff that doesn't usually indicate a win. But Breece Hall, like everyone wanted to celebrate Nathaniel Hackett on the Jets after that game. He should be handing that game ball to Breece Hall, I think. So yeah, the best thing Hackett did in that game, and I think there was a bunch of stuff you could criticize him for. Some good stuff, but the best thing he did was give Breece Hall the ball like 20 times or whatever it was between the carries and the receptions he also had, and that was the right move. It was working, so you keep going to it. And Breece Hall, if a hole is there, he's going to hit it. And Dalvin Cook, if a hole is there, he's going to get 5 yards. And that's they finally pulled back on Dalvin Cook. Michael Carter did play a little bit, but ultimately it's the Breece Hall show, and they should ride him. I mean, the unfortunate part about running backs is you never know what that's going to mean a year or two from now if they're riding him this much, but he's their best offensive player. Garrett Wilson's not getting the ball enough. That's another topic, obviously, but give the ball to Breece Hall. He's, I had this thought watching that game, like you really do wonder like how much different their season would have gone last year if Breece doesn't go down, because he was their entire offense. He makes it so you have to, watch for him, and then maybe that opens things up on the back end to some degree. And then you lose him, and they only win 7 games. Like I think it would be fair to say they might have won at least 1 or 2 more games last year, and then maybe we're talking about last season differently, and maybe Mike LaFleur doesn't get fired or whatever. But yeah, he's very good, and I'm not the only one who talked about it this way, but I said repeatedly I didn't see a scenario where he was going to be as fast and explosive as he was last year, just because nobody besides Adrian Peterson pretty much was the same player the year after. Like,
right.
Saquon Barkley
like a year to come back, another year to be yourself, usually.
Yes. Breece Hall is a freak athlete, but he's not like Saquon Barkley physically, who's like an absolute freak. And Saquon Barkley was pretty brutal the first year after. He was not the same player. And Breece is running with confidence. He doesn't seem to be worried about the knee. He has a lot of, if you just talk to the kid, he just has so much confidence in him. He's got a lot of swagger. Like, he's very funny. And it's really cool to see him kind of showing out and showing, I should shout out One Jets Drive, because they did a whole documentary on his comeback where they got some real great behind the scenes footage. I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing yet. They went back to his hometown, talked to a lot of his family. The training staff was really highlighted, and I
It's
highly
like
recommend
everything
watching it.
that we didn't get in Hard Knocks on Breece,
Exactly,
right?
yeah, which
Yeah.
clearly the Jets were kinda like, "You
I
guys
wonder
can't
if that
handle
was
him."
there, if
Yeah,
they pushed him off, right?
yeah, 'cause
Like,
I
don't
so I see the One Jets Drive guys around all the time, and I've like, struck up a relationship with those guys, and they were teasing the Breece thing to me, like, months ago.
yeah.
And they were waiting for, like, him to be fully unleashed and, like, fully cleared and all that stuff, and then he was, and then he had this great game right after the documentary came out, which was great timing, actually, but, yeah, it's pretty great, and the Jets, if you wanna believe the Jets have a chance to at least stay competitive this year, then Breece is the absolute number one reason, like, without question to me.
All right, let's get into Hackett a little bit. He got the win. They scored 31 points, misleading 31 points in a lot of ways, I think,
Yeah,
because the thing is they kept scoring points because
field
Greg
goals.
Zuerlein is the special teams player of the week in the AFC because
Greg
they
the
just
leg.
kept kicking field goals. So props to Greg the Leg for that. So there's two ways to look at it, right? They got to the red zone
Yeah.
5 times and they kicked field goals. So that's good. But you got to do this is the NFL. And usually when you're playing teams better than the Denver Broncos,
Yeah.
5 field goals is not going to get it done. It worked on Sunday, but it's not going to. So in your mind, now one of the 5 was the end of the half, right? Which we can get into from
Oh,
a
yeah, that
Zach
was
perspective there and that
speaking of
disaster.
speaking of reasons why they deserve to get criticized, yes, that's number
Right.
one. Yeah.
And that was the clock, obviously, and management and everything that went wrong there. But as far as the other ones go, in your mind, like what could they be doing differently once they're down close to the goal line that they weren't doing?
So it's something I was hammering on Twitter, and I felt vindicated when Aaron Rodgers went on the Pat McAfee show and basically said what I've been saying. He was talking about the Packers game and how they struggled in the red zone, and then he kind of alluded to the Jets game, and he was basically saying how it's one of the hardest places to like call plays from is like the 10, like third and 7 to 10 yards from like the 10-yard line or 20-yard line or whatever it is. Like it's hard to find a play because the defense knows exactly where you need to be and all that stuff. And so, as you pointed out, they were going run, pass. Like when you go run, pass, and they did that not only in the red zone, but especially in the red zone. Like it really limits you because if you don't get enough yards on first down in that run, you're already behind the 8 ball. And then if you do it again on second down, so let's say you get 2 yards on first down and you get another 4, you still have, I mean, 3rd and 4 is the more manageable, but like it's, anyway, I'm getting into the weeds, but the point is like, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage, especially when the defense is expecting that to happen, which they kept doing it over and over again. And so it was not hard to figure out. So like throw a play action in there on first down. Like maybe, okay, you're doing that throughout the first half or whatever. Like then maybe throw in a play action every now and then because the defense is expecting you to run it instead of running it when they're expecting you to run it. Like the play calling in the red zone it was mind blowing to me. I'm guessing part of it was they were willing to be conservative because they thought they could beat the Broncos with field goals, and they ultimately were proved right. And so they didn't want to take any risks once they got there with Zach and throwing picks. But we just went over this last week. Like, stop playing so scared. Like I know, he still is making a lot of bad mistakes and he's missing some guys that are wide open. But he's been more accurate. I think he's been better at making decisions. He's been better at like not throwing it. I mean, he had an interception. He's had many worse interceptions. I don't think it was a great throw. It was one-on-one Garrett Wilson to Patrick Surtain. And most of the time when Garrett Wilson is one-on-one, you're going to go to him. So I understood that. But anyway, I just think the play calling was the issue in the red zone. And as you mentioned, like you can pull that off against the Broncos, but it's like a glass half full thing. Like the fact that they're getting to the red zone that many times is absolutely encouraging. And Breece Hall is a big reason for that. But like getting there is half the battle. You have to score touchdowns. Like this was a problem last year too. Like if you remember I think it was the Vikings game with Mike White, a quarterback last year, that I think they were 1 for 6 in the red zone in that game and they lost by like less than a touchdown. Like you have to close those drives out with touchdowns. This is the NFL in 2023. Like the Jets are not scoring points. They're not scoring touchdowns. And this is an offensive league. It's designed for offenses. I mean, this year has been a little more unique and I feel like defenses have been better, but the Jets have to finish those drives. They have some hard teams coming up. I mean, the Eagles are very hard. They have a bye. Giants, not very scary. Chargers are going to be a high-scoring team. Even some of these bad teams they'll play later in the year, they can score some points. So then you get that figured out. That's the biggest question I have on offense, even beyond whether you trust Zach or not. the fact that you can get to the red zone means that you've done enough to get there. Now you have to close it out. Like, I don't know if they're just trying to get the explosive plays when they're not in the red zone. Then when they get there, they're too scared of turning it over. But use some creativity, use your weapons, get to guys like Garrett Wilson and Xavier Gibson in space, whatever you got to do. Just stop doing run, pass.
And it's what everyone praised them for against the Chiefs
Yeah.
was getting away from run, pass, doing play action on early downs and giving Zach the chance to throw in running situations and all of that. Like, I feel like there was a week of like, hey, here it is. It clicked. Like, good job, Hackett. And then like right back to the scared formula. We'll call it that.
Yep.
The scared formula.
Yeah.
That gets you a lot of field
I think
goals.
I saw a stat that the Jets are like 32nd in terms of passing the ball on first down, like out of 32 teams. Like they just never do it. And, and I get running on first down, especially if it's Breece, but like you have to vary it. You have to get more creative with this stuff. And there were not a lot of creativity play calling. There was a good play call on the long completion to Garrett Wilson late in the game. Like it wasn't like, it wasn't as bad as I think Hackett maybe was the first few weeks, but it was still alarming. And you alluded to this, maybe we should talk about it now, the moment before halftime.
Yeah.
You can set it up if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody is, witnessed it and was pulling their hair out and screaming at the television and maybe throwing things because you could just see it developing, right? It was a nice job to get down there into scoring position. You're gonna, go into halftime with some sort of points. And then I don't know where the blame lies the most. I guess only Zach Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett know that. Like, is it on Zach for hitting a guy that wasn't going to be able to get out of bounds? Is it on Hackett for having that option available in the pass tree?
Yeah, so,
and then the other thing is like when he went down, I think it was like 11 seconds or 12 seconds in my mind, because it wasn't a long throw. I thought there was plenty of time to spike the ball. And it didn't seem like there was some urgency, but it didn't seem like a race to the line. And like Zach wasn't like ready the moment the ball was put down to like snap it and spike it. It was almost like they were in 2-minute drill, but not in the clock's about to run out in 3 seconds drill, right?
Yeah. To answer your question, I think it is a combo of being on Zach Wilson and Hackett, because to your point, like he called the play where there was a route where the tight end was inbounds. And so Zach was obviously had the option of throwing it there. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that route going there unless it was a fake out. Like, it needs to be made clearer to Zach that you either throw it towards the end zone, throw it towards the sideline, or you throw it away. And there needs to be a better job of calling a play that makes it that's the only place he can go. And, maybe that's harder to get something complete or whatever. But yeah, and then there's the part of it of the urgency. Like there was such a lack of urgency to get to the line. I think there was 10 seconds left by the time CJ was getting up. And I think they probably would have had a time to spike it. I think you're cutting it close at 10 seconds probably, but they should have had time to spike it, have like a second or two left, and Greg Zuerlein comes in. They're lucky that this game didn't come down to that moment, because that would have been all we're talking about this week if not for that. But that was absolutely alarming. And the first half was very indicative of like this team has been awful starting the game, and until they fix that, they're again not going to beat good teams. Like it's a coaching thing, I think, at this point. Like if your guys are not getting up in the first quarter, like eventually you have to decide it's on the coaching staff. That's a scripted portion of the game, and that's what you're practicing all week. The defense has been awful in the first quarter and great in the other 3 quarters. The offense, I think they've been out. I had the numbers in my story off the game. I don't have them in front of me, but they've been absolutely destroyed in the first quarter, and good teams play for 4 quarters well. So
37-5, they've been outscored. And obviously of that 5 points, 2 of it is the defense with the safety.
Yeah.
And then the yardage, 559 to 141. I mean,
yeah. So that's bad on both sides, offense and defense. But if the offense would start scoring early, then it would make it a lot easier for the defense when they're holding up the rest of the game to keep holding up. And so then the games will look a little better, and they can, run the clock out with Breece Hall and stuff. But instead they're playing from behind or whatever, and they have to have all these miraculous things like the safety and Quincy Williams playing out of his mind, and all this stuff needs to happen. And you could get out of that if you just come out with a more creative game plan in the first quarter. Like this is on the coaching staff to figure it out, especially against an Eagles team that is very well coached and as talented as any team they'll play this year.
All right, you teased it, Quincy Williams. Let's go there. Let's swing back to the positive. What a just nightmare for the Denver Broncos, Quincy Williams was. And people should check out, go to theathletic.com/can't wait. You could subscribe for a great deal right now, but check out Zach's feature on Quincy, which really gets into kind of the backstory of how Quincy went from like the guy that would make the highlight reel, but then get burned on 3 straight plays to now being like a every down force, making really, I mean, let's face it, game-changing plays on Sunday, right? Like the strip sack basically ended that game. So yeah, just talk about the story a little bit, Zach. And I guess Mosley is a big part of that story too.
Yeah.
For all the Mosley haters out there, read the story and you'll feel better.
Yeah, I mean, Quincy has been great, not just in that game. He's been great all year. And he's a real testament to something that doesn't happen as often these days in the NFL, where teams kind of give up on guys real quick. It helps that this coaching staff has been here all 3 years, but like to develop him from where he was when they brought him in, which was clearly talented, but still needed a lot of work, to where he is now, where he's on track to make the Pro Bowl, I think, as of right now. Like, there's a lot of credit on all angles. Like, Quincy, number one, deserves the credit because he put in the work. This coaching staff, Mike Rutenberg, who I talked to in the story, the linebackers coach, Salah, Jeff Ulbrich, and CJ Mosley, like everybody putting in the work to get Quincy here. Like, it's been a remarkable coaching job. But yeah, Quincy has talked a lot about how, especially this offseason, but I think even before that, he's basically conjoined CJ Mosley at the hip, and he's wanted to learn everything about like his process, how he stays healthy. Just like how he's able to start quickly. Is like he's really just like picked CJ's brain, watched his film, asked him questions, and so that's been like, I think CJ's had a lot of influence over Quincy. And for whatever Jets fans think about CJ Mosley, I think he's better than the Jets fans think he is, and he's probably not as good as like the All-Pro thing last year would indicate. But I think he's a leader. Certainly, you saw it on Hard Knocks. He was kind of, he's like a vocal leader in a lot of ways, and he's a very smart football player. And so I think Quincy did the right thing learning from him. Quincy comes in early almost every day, it sounds like, to watch film. And this offseason, he met with a new trainer. He met with the Jets team dietitian. He was doing defensive back drills to help himself in coverage. And as Mike Grunberg pointed out to me, like, he didn't actually subscribe to the whole, I mean, of course he's going to say this, but his whole thing that he said to me is he didn't subscribe to the whole idea that Quincy was just kind of like running wildly and, making a lot of mistakes. In his mind, he was learning a new position because in college he played more of like a linebacker safety hybrid role. And in the NFL, or at least with the Jets, he was playing linebacker like behind the defensive lineman, like the more traditional way, which was new for him. So it was a process. But Quincy put in the work. And I think, I wasn't here at the time, but I feel pretty safe in saying that when he was claimed by the Jets, like there was some assumption that he was brought here just because he was Quinn's brother. I think he's made it pretty clear that's not the case, and the Jets have insisted that's not the case. Salah said that he wanted to draft him when he was at the 49ers, which is a thing you can say after the fact, and nobody's going to be able to double check it. But he said he sent a text to the Jaguars GM, Dave Caldwell, who drafted him and was fired before Quincy got cut. And he sent him like a photo, and he's like, "You were right. He's a good freaking linebacker." But yeah, Quincy's development has been one of the stories of the season. I think he's been arguably their most valuable player on defense so far, especially because they haven't really gotten sacks up front. And he hasn't been missing tackles. He's been much, much better in coverage, which was even he admitted the other night. He said he knew that coverage was his weakness, so he was doing DB drills this offseason to get with it. And so now he's not just a guy who's fast and a big hitter. He's a guy who's fast and a big hitter and like knows what he's doing out there. Like the whole thing was, it took him like 2 years to figure out what he was doing. This offseason, he spent learning what all 10 other guys were doing on the defense. And so he's just put himself in position to be as good as he is right now. And it's all of a sudden, it looks like that contract the Jets gave him looks like a bargain if he keeps this up, because if he's a Pro Bowl or All Pro, like, $6 million a year is nothing.
All right, let's talk about the 2 players that were inactive on Sunday and kind of what it means. Mecole Hardman, Carl Lawson. Lawson, it's just, I mean, they continue to say like he's just getting back and eventually he's going to get in there. I think Hardman's the more interesting thing, right? Because like the stories are starting to come out now that maybe they're shopping him and he could be dealt before the deadline. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, I think it was Jeremy Fowler reported that the Jets were exploring trades for him. I don't think that's a very shocking revelation based on what's transpired so far. As we've talked about, like at a certain point, don't listen to their words, listen to their actions. Like the Jets have made it pretty clear what they think about Mecole Hardman. I think when they signed him, they had high hopes for him. I think if you would talk to anybody in the building in March or whenever they signed Randall Cobb, I think they would have told you the plan is for Mecole Hardman. Well, they still had Elijah Moore when they signed him, but once they traded him, like I think the plan was for Mecole to be the Elijah Moore in this offense and a souped up version of Braxton Berrios. And it was for Randall Cobb to be a leader who didn't play much. And as training camp progressed, you saw that kind of flipping. You saw Randall Cobb playing more than him. And then as we got to the season, you saw Xavier Gipson emerge. And anytime we ask Robert Saleh about Hardman, he like kind of changes the topic to Xavier Gipson. So he's telling us Xavier Gipson is ahead of him on the depth chart. Xavier Gipson plays on special teams. Hardman was signed at the idea he'd be a returner. And then they got this undrafted rookie kid who, if not for his muff punts the other day, he'd be on track for the Pro Bowl. I don't know if that hurts him or not because his punt return touchdown in week 1 was pretty amazing. But they found this kid who they love. Xavier Gipson's been playing like 10 snaps a game. Mecole Hardman was inactive. Like, I'd be shocked if Hardman is on the roster after the trade deadline. I think the team that makes the most sense, and it's been suggested by people other than me already, is the Chiefs, just because they obviously knew how to use him. And I think if you're going to criticize this coach staff, I think the fact that the Chiefs figured out how to use a guy with that level of speed, you'd think that this team should be able to do that too. But, maybe Patrick Mahomes makes guys look better or whatever. But trading to the Chiefs, a team that doesn't really have much at receiver, kind of makes sense to me. I think there will be a team who would trade for Mecole. He has the talent. I saw a lot of people saying the Panthers want a receiver. Sure, there's some other teams. It wouldn't be much. But at this point, it's not surprising that he's not playing anymore just because this coaching staff clearly doesn't believe in him. Like, I don't know how else to phrase it. Like, I would have tried to get him the ball creative ways, like as a gadget player, getting him the space like we've talked about, but they want to do that with Xavier Gipson, not Mecole Hardman. And if they think Xavier Gibson's a better player, I get it. But ultimately it's going to count as a loss on Joe Douglas's resume. I think he got $4 million guaranteed with the chance to earn like $5 million. So that's $4 million down the drain. And, as they're getting closer to up to the cap, the cap's going to expand itself, but ultimately it was a bad signing. And that's kind of showed itself out. If they can get like a 6th-round pick for him, then maybe feel a little better about it, I guess. But it was it's not great. The Carl Lawson one is one we've kind of discussed. I was surprised to see him inactive, but it made some sense, I guess, if you really think about it.
Looking ahead, Eagles coming up this week, 5-0 Eagles. They're one of 2 undefeated teams left in the NFL, along with the 49ers. Good news on that front. It sounds like DJ Reed may be ready to go on Sunday.
Yeah, again, we do have to take press conference quotes about injuries with a grain of salt these days.
Yes.
But, so they had a walkthrough today, which means we weren't out at practice. But Saleh made it sound like Reed had cleared some part of the protocol and he was out there, which would mean he's on track to play. I think something we've learned this year is guys with concussions are going to miss the next game. Like it's happened like 100% of the time so far. So it might have just been this last week.
The Tua effect, I think.
Yeah, the Tua effect for sure. And I get it. I think that's honestly the right move ultimately.
Yeah.
Even if it sucks in some cases, maybe it's like a minor concussion or whatever, but a concussion's a concussion. But yeah, Reed.
Yeah, they say there is no minor concussion.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
like that's what the doctors will tell you.
Yeah, and I'm not a doctor. But so yeah, DJ Reed, we've talked about it. He's a very important member of this defense. Breece Hall, I think, deserves some credit. We haven't talked about him. We don't need to get into him too much, but he was a guy that obviously has been kind of left for dead by this fan base and to a degree the coaching staff because they have signed and drafted all these guys. But Brandon Echols was out, DJ Reed was out. Breece Hall came in, did the job, and had pretty much the game-winning touchdown on that scoop and score. Did his job at corner. Everybody in the locker room loves Breece Hall. Like the way Sauce was talking about him, it was like he was his hero or something. Like he's like, I look up to him and all this stuff. So I think Breece is a very nice kid who is an NFL cornerback. I think he's just been in a tough situation, and this is why they kept him ultimately. I know some people thought they would cut him, but I think he's a guy to keep around unless they get like a great trade offer for him. But yeah, DJ Reed coming back, especially this week, is very important because the Eagles are they're top heavy at receiver. They have 2 guys, and then the rest aren't that challenging. But Devontae Smith and AJ Brown are number 1 receivers on most teams, especially AJ Brown. But I think Devontae Smith is almost underrated at this point just because you don't hear about him as much. But like those guys are absolute studs. So you need Sauce on one, you need DJ on the other. Michael Carter II is healthy. Their safeties are healthy again. Like you want all your weapons on the back end there for an Eagles team that can really, take the top off on you if you're stopping the run or you're not stopping the run. Like things can really open up and get out of hand quickly. So having DJ Reed is going to be absolutely crucial for this game against the Eagles.
When we look at this game against the Eagles, I just wanted to move into like a couple key spots. That's obviously one of them. Always the cornerback on the receivers for any good offensive team like the Eagles are. But I think this game's really going to be decided, like a lot of games are, down in the trenches, right? And when you look at on one side of the ball, it's strength versus strength, right? It's the Eagles defensive front that, as you said, haven't gotten that many sacks, but they have pressure. They have done overall a good job against a great Eagles offensive line. So let's do that one first. Like, it doesn't feel like this is the week that this defensive front suddenly breaks through with a bunch of sacks. So how did it? But I guess if they keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket, maybe that's a win.
Yeah. I do wonder, we mentioned Quincy. We didn't get into specifics about his play or anything. They blitzed Quincy on like 2 or 4 plays on that last drive.
Yeah.
And they don't blitz in this defense very often. And my point being, like, I wonder if you start throwing some ring. You don't want to get too out of like your game plan, especially against a team like Eagles who will capitalize if you mess up. But stuff like sending Quincy, whatever it is, DJ Reed the week before, sending him to Patrick Mahomes, he did run right by him, and then, like,
he whiffed.
One of the craziest clips I've maybe ever seen. But it worked because he got there. He just like kept running. So, and
the thing with Russell Wilson, though, Russell got away he scrambled effectively in that game Sunday. They have to be careful against the Eagles.
Yeah. But yeah, to your, they definitely, I mean, Jalen Hurts is as dangerous of a runner as anybody. He's a running back who can throw well. Like, I don't mean that as a diss. I mean that as like he's good enough to be a running back while also having the ability to be a top 10 NFL passer. But so that Eagles offensive line doesn't really have any holes. Cam Jurgens, he's a second year now. He's hurt. So they've been starting a guy named Sua Opeta, a former undrafted rookie. If there is a weak spot on that offensive line, it's probably him. And Quinnen, you would hope could be able to eat there. But yeah, this isn't, they're not really going to give up as much pressure unless somebody's hurt. They have Jason Kelce in the middle. He's the best center in the NFL, and he's going to wind up going down as one of the best ever. He's an absolute stud. Lane Johnson has been the best right tackle in the NFL for a long time, I think. Jordan Mailata is like one of the best draft and develop stories. Like, you want to talk about Quincy, like that guy was a rugby player from Australia. They have the best offensive line coach in the league, Jeff Stoutland. Like, this is a group that does not make mistakes usually. Even Dickerson, the other guard, he's like a Pro Bowl caliber guy. So the defensive line needs to get more pressure, or at least get to the quarterback. It's going to be hard against this team, but this is why they built this defensive line, to be able to compete with any offensive line. And so this is the week you prove what you're made of. Bryce Huff is hard for anybody to block, especially because of the way they use him. And so he's kind of the guy I have my eye on. If he can get by Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata, or they do stunts or whatever they have to do to get him to the quarterback, like Bryce Huff is the one I have my eye on. And you hope Quinnen can kind of like break through a little bit too. He's been really, really good, but hasn't gotten the quarterback down yet. So, and then, this kind of goes into the thing that gets talked about now anytime you're playing the Eagles is the tush push. That's entirely an offensive line and Jalen Hurts based thing. And they have perfected it for a lot of reasons. They'll run it at some point on Sunday. The Jets will know it's coming and probably won't be able to stop it, but they have the defensive line that's supposed to be able to stop teams like this. You signed Al Woods to be a run stopper. You signed Quentin Jefferson to be a pass rusher. You have John Franklin Myers. You have Bryce Huff, Jermaine Johnson. Like, these are guys that are all supposed to be absolute studs. And if you want people to believe that you're really the best defensive line in the league, which I think they talk about themselves as, like, this is the week to show what you're made of. And even if they don't, it'll be hard to blame them because of how good that O-line is. But yeah, that's going to be a matchup that's kind of going to dictate this game, because if the defense can force Jalen Hurts into any mistakes, like, we know how good the back end for the Jets is, especially at corner. So if you can pressure Jalen Hurts, he can be inaccurate sometimes, get him out of sorts, then that'd be huge. But, you also have some concerns about, there's been a lot of games this year already where there's just wide open holes in the middle of the field for the quarterback to run to. Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Josh Allen, they all took advantage of it. They haven't really had QB spies. So everybody needs to be on their assignment, and you can't miss tackles like you have, because the Eagles will eat you alive with that.
Yeah, and they play so much man that they're kind of set up for letting the quarterback escape and get big gains. I'm going to throw this in because Brian Sternbeck is opening the door for us to mention it. So maybe we'll hit some SEO numbers with this. But he mentions, how do you mention Jason Kelsey on the O-line and gloss over Swift? And I will say this, the Chiefs play Thursday night this week. So is there a chance that Travis and Taylor come to the Jets-Eagles game on Sunday?
Oh man, why'd you have to even bring that up?
I didn't do it. It's Brian's fault.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really. People are getting mad anytime we talk about trouble. But I just to Kelsey's point, like not to tie it to the Swift thing, but number one, their podcast is awesome. I love their podcast. The documentary, as we talked about on here, is great. And Jason Kelsey has had one of the more fascinating careers. I think people don't even realize it, because there was a stretch where he was graded as one of the worst offensive linemen in the league, I think in like 2016 or something like that.
Undrafted.
And I don't know if and he's considered retirement for like each of the last 5 years, and he keeps coming back.
And that entire documentary was like a retirement.
I know. It was like him saying how he's going to retire. And then he's like, actually, I'm not going to retire.
Yeah.
But he's like the rare offensive lineman that's broken through in terms of fame, because not only in Philly, where he's like basically the mayor of Philadelphia, like people know who Jason Kelsey is outside of Philadelphia. And that's pretty rare for a center to be like that. And he's fun to watch. Like offensive lineman, the best offensive lineman you don't even notice very often. Sternbeck, he said he's talking about DeAndre Swift, obviously. Yeah. Touche, man. Yeah. Touche. DeAndre Swift has been very good, by the way, too. Yeah, they have a Kelsey and a Swift on the Eagles. So there you go.
All right. The other offensive line, is it like strength on strength, Jets defensive line against Eagles offensive line. The problem is that the Eagles defensive line is also a strength, and we talked about the Jets offensive line. So that's just a matter of survival. And man, Zach's going to have to get rid of the football.
Yeah. I mean, the Eagles defensive line is probably, their eyes are probably pretty wide right now. Like that group is, again, it's pretty unreal. It's something that people maybe have forgot about. Like Fletcher Cox was close to signing with the Jets. Like that was a real thing, by the way. I think he was hurt last week, so I'm not 100% sure if he's playing this week, but he's one of the best defensive tackles the league has seen in the last decade. And he's pretty much a rotational guy now, because they have Jalen Carter, who fell he's just one of the quintessential, like it's always like the Eagles and the Ravens, who get guys who fall for whatever reason. They scoop them up and they wind up being as good as everybody thought they were going to be, but they dropped. And Jalen Carter looks like an absolute like all pro already.
He might have been the number one pick, if not for the stuff.
He was great. I think Dane Brugler had him number one in terms of the rankings, if I remember correctly. So again, they're like the Jets in the way they rotate. They always have been. So like they're coming at you in waves, like the defensive ends. You have Brandon Graham, who has gotten better as he's gotten older. It's like another one of the crazy things. Like he was kind of cast aside by the Eagles because he was like a very high picked over Earl Thomas. Eagles fans hated him. And then he became like just absolute stud. Derek Barnett's a rotational guy. They drafted a guy in the first round from Georgia, Nolan Smith. They have a couple other, I'm blanking on some of their guys. Hassan Reddick. I can't believe I forgot him. He had like 20 sacks last year. He's probably going to go against Max Mitchell a lot. I was reading an Eagle story. I think that's going to be the lineup. And so you're going to find out what Max Mitchell is made of. And you hope that they learn their lesson from the Cowboys game. There's no Micah Parsons necessarily that you're going to have like, double team every play, but play Jeremy Ruckert more often. Play Nick Bodden if he's not hurt. Like give help to Zach Wilson and this offensive line, because they're absolutely going to need it. And, it's going to limit maybe what you can do down the field, but the Jets are not going to win against the Eagles if it's a high scoring game. They're going to win if it's like, if they want to win this game, it's going to be a low scoring one where they grind it out. And Zach Wilson needs to not turn the ball over, and the offensive line needs to, I don't know, call play action, call plays to get Zach rid of the ball quickly, because it's going to be hard.
Let's do picks real quick. It's early. It's Wednesday, but we're doing it anyway. These lines could change a little bit. BetMGM always giving us our lines, and we appreciate them bringing us this segment. First, the standings, where Gurman, after coming on the show last week where he had like a little bit of a significant lead, we jinxed him. Yeah, he fell back. He's now one back, so he's still towards the top, but it's a three-way tie at the top with 38 correct games so far. T. Levy, Jimbo Brennan, and New Nijmegen Jets tied with 38, all over 60% with their picks. So I hope with these picks that they're not just doing them here, to be honest. Like, I hope.
By the way, I want to say, so I also do picks for the Athletic. I usually do them earlier in the week by the time I do the ones on this one, I always forget what I did with the other ones, and I kind of just in the moment decide. And I'm in like among Athletic NFL writers, I think I'm in second or third place on that one. I am not that high in this. So.
Yeah, where are you on this one? Yeah, 33. There you are.
Okay, not terrible. I'm doing better on the other one though.
And I am 32. Yeah. So I'm still over 50%, which is my total goal for the entire season. If I can stay above 50%, I will be happy.
There are some interesting games this week. No like great team against great team matchups really, but there's some interesting ones.
And some real big spreads. Like you got the Chiefs and Broncos spread, which that just seems like it's still just going to be Chiefs, right? I went Chiefs there. And then where were some of the other? Oh, the Giants. I took the Giants. I mean, plus 14.5.
They're pretty bad though.
I know that.
And Daniel Jones might not play, remember.
And the Bills are coming off a loss, so they're going to be.
Yeah, the Bills are really banged up on defense, but I just think the Giants are like a bottom 3 team in the league this year. So
yeah, I'm just saying Giants get some sort of late garbage score to get within a couple touchdowns,
and
they win that one.
Tyrod Taylor revenge game.
Yeah, and the other big spread is which should be really bad. Dolphins Panthers. 13.5 in Miami. Panthers still looking for their first win. So obviously they're going to get it in that game.
Oh yeah, that's how the NFL works for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that 13.5 does feel like a trap with the 0-5.
That is a really
on the road.
2 touchdowns is a big number for sure.
Yeah. So definitely some dangerous games. Yeah. And I took Carolina, not to win, but
plus to cover the spread.
Yeah. Anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, there's a couple of games. There's a lot of there's a lot of teams that are like 2 teams that you can't really tell what like the Ravens Titans game, like the Ravens week to week. You know, like they look like a Super Bowl team one week and look awful the next one. I like which game? Oh, the Colts Jaguars game. Like, can the Jaguars win a game when they're not in the UK?
Right, that's why I went with the Colts, because I thought Jacksonville coming back to the United States. Jonathan Taylor probably gets more of a workload.
Yeah, and Gardner Minshew looked pretty good. He's looked pretty good filling in. Yep. I think Anthony Richardson's more dynamic, but I think the Saints Texans is an interesting one just because the Texans have been better than expected. That line is actually pretty closer than I thought. Yeah, that line's maybe a little too close, honestly. So I picked the Saints on that one. I think the Buccaneers are a sneaky good one, plus 3.5 against the line. I know the lines are very good, but that Bucs defense has been good and Baker Mayfield's been pretty good. Like, I could see them kind of being sneaky
at home.
And I mean, Cowboys minus 2.5. Everybody's down on the Cowboys right now, but when the Cowboys aren't playing the best team in the league, they tend to play very well. And I don't think Chargers are that good necessarily. So, like I said, a lot of these games, the 2 teams are like pretty close, I feel like. So, and I think that Rams game line is a little too high because the Cardinals have been pretty competitive. So,
yeah, that one was tricky. I just can't believe in the Cardinals.
Yeah, it's understandably, yeah. And they did just lose James Conner, and they have a guy I've never heard of filling in for him. So,
all right, this has been fun. Thanks for tuning in. Our only episode this week. Apologies for that, but we'll be back again, obviously, with a full recap of the Eagles early on next week, and we'll keep going throughout the season. Get your picks in. Don't forget, it's an early reminder this week since it's only Wednesday, but get those in before that Thursday. You don't want to miss out on the Thursday game. That I feel like the standings could come down to like people that made sure they always got that Thursday game in, as long as you get it right, being a difference maker. So get those in, and we will talk to everybody next week on the Can't Wait podcast.